What's going on? Another edition of Boxing History Every Night. We call it that somewhat. 86 Boxing. Appreciate you all being here. Welcome to the channel. For those new, those returning, you are appreciated. Be sure to give us a like and subscribe. This is going to be a pretty special episode. We have a special guest who's going to be in attendance. Really quick, shout out to Skywalker Boxing. Shout out to Just Frank, who I know dropped in a little bit earlier. But yeah, we're going to jump into this thing. And as mentioned, very excited about it. You know, the boxing world is very tight knit. It's a small group in, if you put it in perspective, just think about just how much ground we cover here in the world as far as the land mass, and then just being able to run into certain individuals when you least expect it, or through connection of another individual. That happened with 86 Boxing as far as attending the Connecticut Boxing Hall of Fame. So we're excited. Very special guest here tonight, Ian Two Guns Kennan, and he does something that is inspirational for all. And if you haven't gotten into it, if you haven't seen it, then I think you're going to be in for a very good surprise. Wheelchair boxing, and he has been essentially the stalwart of that of the sport in itself, growing and more individuals being involved, and not too shabby himself. He puts in that work, of course. So representing Connecticut, which is a fighting state, and they have some fighting towns there. Shout out to the Mohegan Sun. It's a place I know we've all seen where boxing goes down. But nonetheless, yeah, I won't keep you further because this is exciting, as mentioned. So I want to welcome to the stage none other than Ian Two Guns Kennan. Appreciate you
Oh,
being here, buddy.
how are you? It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite tonight, and let's dive into some boxing, man.
All right, all right. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it was great running into you, even though we didn't get to fully connect there at the Connecticut Boxing Hall of Fame this year, which was a great event. They do it well there for sure. And you know, my partner, she actually got a chance to speak with you, and I was bummed out, I must say, Ian, because I wanted to get the opportunity to connect with you there myself. And as I was mentioning to you before we came on air, I saw you chatting with Joe Cusano, who's actually in the building. Salute to you, Joe Cusano. Appreciate you being here. And
What's up, Joe? Thanks for the intro, my friend. You have a wonderful evening.
oh yes, indeed. So yeah, and that was like one of the things I wanted to do, is get a chance to chat with you. So I had to reach out, and Melissa, she had told me, hey, hit him up on Facebook. So I had to do so. So man, just a great story and all of that. Uh, tell me, can you just tell the listeners here just how you got started in the sport of boxing in itself, considering that it's a very niche sport, as I say, and not everyone wants to get involved, and it's a contact sport. You know how that can be for some people. So yeah, just tell me how boxing came to for you.
Oh, of course. So, boxing and disability, you don't think those two things go together, let's be honest, right? So, for me, the melding came when Cinderella Man came out back in 2005, and like every little kid saw Jimmy Braddock, and in my mind, Jimmy and I had a lot in common. We both were Irish. We both had no left hand. Me because of cerebral palsy, which is what I was born with,
Mhm.
and Jimmy because he kept breaking his. So I begged my mom at the time I was 12, Mom, can we go to the gym? Can we go to the gym? And she said no. And then one day after school, when I was a freshman, 2 years later, when I had a particularly rough day of kids picking on me and teachers not getting it, and sort of the whole teenage angst trifecta, I asked my mom if we could go to a local gym, and there I met Connecticut Boxing Hall of Fame's alums John Iceman Scully and Pito Cordona,
Mhm.
and the rest is history. Then my parents divorced. My dad, being a son of a physician, recognized the biomechanical benefits of boxing, and I said I didn't want to do physical therapy anymore. I wanted to do that, so
Hmm.
That was how the sport came about. And lo and behold, I got healthier. A lot of kids in wheelchairs and adults in wheelchairs have osteoporosis issues because we don't weight bear. But hitting the bag and weightlifting got my bones to the point that they were normal. I got full use of my left hand. It used to be contracted up here. Now I've got
Mm.
0 degree extension with it. Um, never was much of a never had much of a jab. It was more of a throwaway punch for me, it but it certainly worked, and I got off all my meds and avoided surgery for 18 years.
That's pretty awesome right there. That is that. Yeah, I mean, just an amazing story, just in general, and to think that boxing, which I find to be a sport that is a bridging sport, and you just run into so many different personalities. That was one of the reasons that helped you to get that fluidity and kind of that regiment that goes into the sport in itself. Now, were you a fan of watching boxing prior to this, or did you have an interest in it always, or something like that?
Cinderella Man is what sparked the interest, as I mentioned, because of a commonality between Jimmy and I. That
Okay.
that's what did it for me. And then I got bit by the bug because
Okay.
when I was working think about it this way: when you were someone who was told that physically you would always be quote unquote broken and not able to perform, then you're doing one of the hardest sports in the world, if not the hardest. And the toughest guys in the room are now your peers and you're learning from them. Imagine what that does to you when you're suffering from depression, PTSD, and so on. Imagine what that does to your confidence as a young teen who's never really been able to fit in, who's never really found a group that they belong in, right? And you would think that given boxing's, sort of thug mentality, the people that don't watch the sport,
Hmm.
that these guys wouldn't be accepting of me. No, they welcomed me into their homes. They invited me to do things when a lot of people on face value don't know how to approach the disabled community. So, you know, that's kind of what it gave me. And it was a springboard to a phenomenal athletic career, a phenomenal competitive career, and developed into so many other things.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's pretty awesome right there. Yeah. I prior I didn't really know of like wheelchair boxing, and I follow the sport. I do things on the amateur side as an official and everything. So this was like a new introduction into for me myself, running into you, and I'm sure that will be the case for some of the listeners who will be tuning in here now, and of course in the aftermath. And I think that sheds some new light that yeah, anything is certainly possible, and just seeing the process, because there are some videos of out there of you competing, which I found to be yeah pretty spectacular. Just kind of seeing the process, and you get to understand it because you're doing a lot of the same moves, that any boxer would typically do. Just you're in a
Defensive
wheelchair,
position, peekaboo style, that's what works. But more to the point from that, was it was a rehab program first, and we had people of all disabilities. We had stroke, we
Mhm.
had paralysis, we had degenerative neuromotor disease, and we had CP. And all the clients that we had working out of Ken Shamrock's Lions Den, which is no longer available, and no longer in business. Shout out to Scully, shout out to Chris Lombardi and Jason Kruska,
Mhm.
um, and Pito. All of those clients that we mentioned, we had a woman who was a C5 paraplegic, so she was abdominals down, she had no feeling. When we were
Mm.
doing lab work, she said she could finally control her bladder and that her stomach hurt, which is a huge
Wow.
deal.
Wow.
And that was all through boxing regimen and combat sports training. That was everything that we worked with. But I got to work with some of the best people in the sport. I got to be trained by Mickey Ward and his nephew Ray, who also had cerebral palsy. Freddie Roach and Peter Welch, whose shirt I'm wearing right now. Shout out to Peter Welch's gym, and the great Tommy Connors. these are the guys who mentored me over the years, and I got to work with some of the best just by approaching them. And I think that's what a lot of young fighters need to learn. If you want to work with a Freddie or work with a Virgil Hunter or a any of those guys, call up, tell them your story, ask for their time. They may not work your corner, but they will invite you into their camp so that you can learn. And I think that was a godsend to me, both as a young fighter and as a young fitness professional.
Yeah, awesome right there. Real quick shout out to Melissa Ty, who's dropped in, says, "Hi, fellas. Appreciate you dropping in." And I think I might have said it at the top, but salute to Skywalker Boxing as well, who's dropped through. But no, that's amazing right there. Those are, top tier trainers right there that you've been working with. To think, Freddie Roach, Mickey Ward, so on and so forth. That is pretty awesome right there. And I think your story is great. Just seeing the process, or at least the information that I was able to gather through some articles and some videos, things of that nature. Now, what was it like in terms of that first time going into the gym? Was it what you anticipated? I know boxing in general, as you go on, you see growth, but what was that first experience like for you?
I mean, it was a cross between a light bulb coming on and coming home. That was what I could say. You put those two feelings together, that's what you get. And to be welcomed and appreciated by guys like Johnny Callis, guys like Matt Remlard, who was one of our honorees this year, and Tony Pino, who was another honoree this year, and to be treated as an equal, and then to say, and for them to watch me and sort of underestimate me in the beginning, some of them, not those guys, but there were some who did, and then to gain their respect by the fact that I always showed up and always put the work in, and then to have them treat me as an equal over time and not just sort of as a give me or as a matter of course because he's in a chair we're going to baby him and treat him as an equal, was a great experience for me and really turned me into the man that I am today.
That is pretty awesome. Yeah, because a disability doesn't mean you can't do. It's just a different process at times. So that is pretty amazing to see you having gone through the process of bringing the sport of boxing into the fold for those in wheelchairs. And I know that I think you started a program. I was reading something. You had a program of your own that you were doing, and I know you were boxing and then kind of shifted into training. Is that something you're still doing, the kind of training side?
We are still doing that. We work with various gyms across the East Coast on a small facility by facility and case by case basis. COVID really affected us, but we are still doing that. And I'm always open to someone if they have someone with challenges in their family or they themselves do want to reach out to me directly. I'm more than happy to help you discover your own pugilistic journey, whether that's training, competing, or both. I'm here for that. So reach out to me.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, you hear it there, folks. You hear it there. You can reach out to Ian. He's on Facebook. So yeah, that is a good thing right there. Because I'd imagine your journey has been inspiring from others, or inspiring for others who maybe were sort of in a place like you said. A lot of times, and even with the sport of boxing, just thinking about the mental aspect, and feeling like, hey, what do I do next? Or if some have a hopeless feeling, just seeing your story, that's inspiring enough that it could bring individuals out of a funk and let them know that, hey, you know what? I can do this. I can do more than what I'm doing right now. So I think that is a very interesting. I think that's a very sort of connecting piece of the journey right there. Just the lives that could potentially be touched just by virtue of seeing you operating there. And I can only imagine that, you being out forefront with it, that it has probably brought others in who may have been in a situation where, they were looking for that kind of next thing for them. And voila, turned out to be the sport of boxing, of all things.
my door is always open, and I think that that's the one thing that I learned from guys in the gym, and you know this yourself in your own journey. We're all there to help each other. We're all there to lift each other up. So that is really what we do. And I see we've got some questions about equipment, and
Yep. Yeah, then this is Melissa, who you this is my partner who you talked with there in Connecticut, actually.
hey Melissa, how are you? So what we've done for equipment is we developed our own proprietary chair that I'm not sitting in right now, because to do regular stuff, it just hurts to sit in and just talk in. So I didn't whip it out. But the back is spring loaded so that when you get hit, you're
Mhm.
compressed, you have somewhere to go, and you yourself know this as an official. That way, that prevents somebody from being grounded and pounded like they would be in MMA. Gives them
Yeah.
somewhere to go, gives them a little bit of a rope to bounce off of and to do things on. And then we have a swivel seat that mimics the follow through of a punch. So that way, when I'm throwing a right hand, the seat swivels and my body goes forward. But we're using traditional headgear, um, 10-ounce gloves. And the way the rules are, when you're a lighter weight like me, when you're a flyweight, your chairs are lined up knee to knee, squared off with each other, and you're closer. Whereas if you're a heavyweight, your chairs are positioned further back. So that way it takes a little something off and you can't really hurt each other. And the late great Steve Smoger, who I'm sure you knew,
Oh,
being
yeah.
at the National Hall of Fame, he was the
Yeah.
guy that signed our rules for us. And I love and miss you, Steve. You were one of my best friends in the sport and always there as a mentor. So,
Oh, yeah, yeah. That is pretty awesome right there. I know of Steve for sure. Yeah, and I actually, yeah, real quick, not to, of course, cut you off, but yeah, Steve Smoger, yeah, just a great guy. I got to interview him once. This was back in, I want to say around 2017 or 2018, something of that tune. And yeah, just a great individual. Of course, been in some classic fights that we can think of in recent memory. And yeah, it was a pleasure being able to chat with him and hear his story and all that. So that's pretty awesome right there that it was Steve Smoger who helped to, curate those rules there. That's pretty awesome.
we only work with nothing but the best with Team Two Guns. We really do. And that's one of the things that I've truly been blessed with. I mean, I was managed by Jackie Callan for a while, for a
Okay.
few fights, managed by the great Al Valente, who guided Mickey Ward's career for many, many years. And trained by Peter Walsh, Tommy Connors, John Scully, Chris Lombardi, Peter Cordona. I mean, that was sort of my local nucleus.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, without that, I wouldn't have been as accomplished as an athlete as I was in or outside of the ring. So there we go. But as far as the benefits of the program that we were able to design from a boxing standpoint, we were able to mitigate the risk of injury. We really, really were.
Yeah. Uh, Shout out to Cirillis Idealist for sending the super chat. Says this is so eye opening and inspiring. I needed
Thank
this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And anyone who wants to can reach out to me on Facebook, or my handle is Two Guns Boxing, no G, on Instagram, and would love to have a dialogue with everybody. So reach out if you'd like. And on the publicity side, I worked with the great Bob Trieger of Full Court Press, the publicist for the Mickey Ward Arturo Gatti trilogy. So, I mean, it was really an all New England affair for most of my career, and which made
That's
it
awesome.
great.
That is awesome. Yeah, I know of Bob Trieger from when I was writing for a site. I know he set up an interview I did with Nico Hernandez. I think it is. He was the Olympian. Nico, I think it was Hernandez. I know he was an Olympian. And yeah, that's pretty awesome. So Bob Triggered, I'm very much familiar with that name right there. Follow him on Twitter, or X as it is now. So that is that's pretty awesome. Yeah, you're right when you say that you work for the or work with the best of the sport right there. I mean, some of these names you're throwing out there, and I know you're just casually talking and all that stuff, but it just so happens these are the very best. And I think that it's certainly an inspiration, and you have the personality where you aren't reserved. And hey, sometimes maybe that an opportunity could pass by, but hey, you seem to be very sure of yourself, bold, and willing to, hey, if you need something, just speak up about it. That's pretty commendable.
Advocate for yourself personally and professionally. That's what you have to do. And I mean, from the standpoint of developing the sport and getting into the competitive side from training, I mean, it was really my father, Steve,
Oh,
and Al who really guided that and brought us to that level. And we were really, really working. And I got to work with some phenomenal promoters as well. Richie Capiello, a New England staple,
yeah.
who guided the careers of so many of Connecticut Boxing Hall of Fame members. He was one of my first promoters, and as an amateur, I won the Rocky Marciano tournament twice,
Oh,
new champion, which was a great experience. I go back every year to the opener and to the finals just to relive the glory days and see young and up and coming amateurs. So that was a phenomenal experience for me.
oh yeah, that's pretty awesome right there. I mean, yeah, what more could you ask for? That's yeah. I mean, I think your story just in general is all inspiring, and to think of the people who could benefit from it as it continues to just expand even more. Now, I was gonna ask in terms of when you started boxing. Was wheelchair boxing a thing? Was it already out there in some capacity, or was
So
it
in
kind
some
of just fresh?
capacity, it was, think of us like UFC in 1993. There were a lot of little organizations, a lot of different rules, different equipment, different setups. Um, but there was no cohesive unit. There was no cohesive organization, and
Okay,
that was one of the things that we wanted to provide.
okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, some of the video that I saw out there that's probably going through development. Were there any growing pains kind of first starting out, or is it like
Oh,
that?
of course
You
there were.
mentioned the wheelchair
It
design and all
was a
that.
regulatory and a licensing issue.
Oh,
What what commission, and you know this yourself as an amateur official, what commission was going to give us the opportunity to do what we do? And the great state of New Hampshire and Bobby Stevens was the commissioner up there, were really at the forefront of allowing us to do what we needed. And when I was an amateur, we would have to go on before sanctioning came into effect at 7 o'clock, and it
oh, okay.
and we would compete before everything went on and or at intermission. So that way, my ability wasn't attributed anywhere. But now USA Boxing has become much more disability friendly, and they
Yes.
they're exploring doing their own stuff, and I'm here as a resource for them if they ever want to use me. So that's kind of where we are. And then on the pro side, it was a matter of finding individual commissions that would be willing to allow us to move forward, because they'd never seen anything like this. So how would they know if they were going to license it or not?
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, that's pretty awesome right there. Just thinking about it from that perspective. Yeah, you do have the sanctioning that comes into play, and so New Hampshire played a interesting critical role there. So that's where you started out boxing there in New Hampshire. Is that the case?
No, I started out here. I started out in Connecticut doing
Okay.
several exhibitions, then moved into Massachusetts.
Okay.
Then when I was going to turn pro, we turned pro up there. So
Okay. Okay.
that was sort of the plan. Um, and we had to come up with a matchmaking protocol that was safe. So what we did was we created that every ringside physician would take on a wheelchair bound athlete as a patient and in their day-to-day practice, so they could review their full-on history.
Yeah.
And before a deal was done, every patient would be looked at and say, hey, these guys match up physically. There's no glaring disparity in what they can do to each other, so we're going to approve
Okay.
this. And then the deal was done. If that makes
Okay.
sense. Because fighter safety, particularly when you're dealing with disability and osteoporosis and
Mm-hmm.
seizure risk and all of those things, is really paramount. So pro or
Yeah.
amateur, we always fought with training style headgear on, not competition style headgear, to make
Oh,
sure that everybody was protected. And we used 10-ounce gloves throughout, just to make sure again that everybody was protected.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. Safety is of the utmost, of course. As an official, one of the mottos is I'd rather stop 1,000 fights early than one fight too late, you know. So safety is definitely the important factor there. So that's pretty awesome. So you've been kind of instrumental in the overall growth of it, then the USA boxing becoming more adopting of it and offering more opportunities. I think that is a great thing because we know that there are a lot of athletes who compete, and it's a big deal when you really boil it down. So you've gone through that, gone from the amateur through the pro ranks right there, and that's pretty amazing right there. Now, as far as that shifts from amateur to pro, did you notice a difference?
No, I didn't. I was
Okay.
I was I was comfortable because again, I always had headgear on. I had the
Okay.
same weight gloves on either way, right?
Mhm.
For me, we I never really got to compete heavily in the pros because my career changed, right?
Okay.
And so the amateurs was where I spent the most of my time,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
and then I turned pro in New Hampshire. Then I had managerial and promoter issues, like everybody does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I got older, and I got heavier, and I got slower, and retirement became a an enticing possibility when we meet a girl and we want to settle down and do those things. So now I'm ready to teach, promote, manage, do all of those wonderful things. Whether it be on the disabled side or the able-bodied side, I'm willing to jump in wherever needed.
Oh yeah, and traditionally, yeah, knowledge has just always been passed down from generation to generation in boxing. So that is one of the key things that I think makes the sport kind of stand out and why we have those historic ties. So how are you liking it, even though you're not competing as a professional right now? How are you liking the training side of the house and being able to kind of lend your experience to others?
Oh, I love it. It to me, it's great because as I mentioned, I was at the Rocky Marciano tournament a while back. With Richie and Mike um, and all of those wonderful individuals. And I was catching young amateurs, and I was seeing mistakes that I caught right away, and amazing talent there as well. And it was one
Oh
of
yeah.
those things where even though I never boxed using my feet, I studied more tape than anybody because I had to adapt what was working from a standing position to a seated position. And the best way to do that is to study tape. So it
Yeah.
was um it was just an amazing opportunity to do that. And when I see young fighters, I'll sit them down and I'll say, listen, I may not have fought the same way you do, but there are things that I see. And if you would like my knowledge from all the great minds that I was able to absorb it from, you know, let's do that. And I mean, the 1-2-1 is such an overlooked combination for everybody that I
Oh
think
yeah.
is a staple taught in the gyms, because it's that second jab off of that two, because you get the centrifugal force of your body off it, and everybody's always expecting a left hook. It's right there for nobody sees it. And we all know the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
Straight line. Yeah, you're right there. Straight punches. And that's what I'm talking about right there. Just some of that historical knowledge that has been passed down, and it's been a customary thing just over the years because on the channel we generally we focus on some of the historic boxing going back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, kind of in that range. So just hearing some of the stories and seeing how some of those individuals were taught, it all lended itself to where we are here today. And some people don't realize it. They think that some of the general things in the sport in itself have evolved to a certain degree. I think it's a safer sport in some capacities or on some fronts, but I do think that from the knowledge standpoint and getting to where we are now, a lot of that has had to do with what has been passed down, and the sport has seen some very, very, very much highs, and it's seen its lows, of course. And we're in an interesting state right now, considering that Showtime is no longer in the sport of boxing, HBO is no longer in the sport of boxing. So there's some adapting that has had to take place. We're seeing it on streaming platforms and all of that
I
stuff now.
was going to say that. Let me throw my promoter hat on for 2 seconds. Streaming
Yeah,
is going to be the way of the sport now,
yeah,
right? Which is going to provide young fighters, with the advent of social media and streaming linkage, through followers, through Twitter handles, through TikTok,
mhm,
the ability to really grow their ticket sales. And it's not going to be who sells live gate anymore. It's going to be who
yeah,
sells streaming buys, and how many eyes you can draw on a particular platform. That's going to really be the way that promoters can equate who their best who their best performer is. And I think that
yeah.
for us as Two Guns as a company, when we were first starting out, that was one of the things that we realized for us as a way to make the disabled side of the sport grow. So, we predicted this, and it's going to be fun to see how it's going to evolve.
All right, that's good stuff right there. Hey, I think you're spot on. Melissa Taya asks, what role does the Special Olympics play in promoting wheelchair boxing? Do they have involvement?
They don't. This is going to be more of a Paralympic role, because Special Olympics is focused a lot on mental challenge and cognitive stuff, and they have a
Okay,
non-contact policy. So
okay,
Paralympics, if you've ever looked at murder ball and
yes.
wheelchair rugby, those guys are nuts. That is one sport that even I won't do, and I'll do some crazy stuff. And that's going to be where we see sort of an organizational shift to adopting the sport and broadening it to an international role. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that's pretty spot on. Yeah, Paralympics. Yeah, that makes sense right there. Okay, good stuff. And I know that that involvement from USA Boxing that can be a means for brokering such. And Melissa had another question here. Let me pull it up. She said, "Mental toughness equals Ian. How do wheelchair boxers cultivate mental resilience in the ring?"
Well, I think that for a lot of the disabled community, and I'm going to speak for myself here, I don't want to speak for anybody else. I think that for a lot of us, because of what we'd endured, whether it's we were in an accident and had to adapt to a new way of living, or in my case, um, you know, that we were born this way, it makes you
Hmm.
tough, and it makes you think critically, and it makes you a problem solver, because boxers are problem solvers. Boxers are
Yeah.
tacticians, right? So you take that sort of mentality and you apply it to combat sports, and it's an easy shift.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense for sure. Now, do you watch? Do you like watch and keep up with the boxing that is going on now?
Oh, I absolutely do. Big Tyson Fury fan at my house.
Okay.
Our house is a Fury house. Our house is a Lomachenko house, and
Okay. Can't go
and
wrong there.
and that's Michael Conlon.
Oh yeah.
As much and I keep and definitely Shakur Stevenson, who's a whiz.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the one thing that I have to say
Mm-hmm.
about the modern era of the sport that annoys me is the level of matchmaking, because you're not seeing fighters be moved up correctly. And I'm not going to say fighters fight the best. Excuse me, allergies. I'm not going to say fighters fighting the best. We're not going to see that in the era of PBC, in the era of protecting a fighter's record. That's not what the mentality of today's sport is. The mentality is maintaining, uh, maintaining a record, maintaining notoriety, maintaining live gate with as little effort as possible. So when you look at that and you look at social media being used as a tool and TikTok being used as a tool and sort of Jake Paul and all the rest moving forward, you will see not necessarily a lack of skill, but a lack of focus on fundamentals,
Yeah.
which is why I admire guys like Tyson Fury, guys like Usyk and
Oh yeah.
Stevenson and Conlon, as I mentioned.
Oh yeah. 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 All those guys can box, and yeah, and I get what you're saying, because sometimes we go into these contests and you just know that X fighter is going to win. Someone is being brought in as an opponent. And, that's generally how it's gone in terms of building up fighters. So I definitely understand where you're coming from. And you're right about the social media aspect, because Jake Paul, he's been able to generate a lot of eyes. And I think that, hey, it's something that we can kind of take it from the sport as a whole, learn from it, and see that we can get those fundamental boxers that you're mentioning there, the likes of Usyk, the likes of Shakur Stevens, and etc. Get them on the forefront so people can see, okay, these are the separating factors in the sport. When you can see guys perform at this level, guys and gals, and you can see that difference in skill set, and it shows you, yeah, this is what it means to be one of the top, one of the elite boxers in the world.
Right. And then now, as we go back to streaming for a second,
Yeah.
now, because networks are not broadcasting boxing, this gives the ability for smaller promoters to
Mm-hmm.
get dates, build a record, then farm out to a DAZN, farm out to Prime, and do that on a much easier basis if done correctly from a business standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that is. Yeah, yeah. I will say that. Yeah, you see a lot more promoters out there, seemingly, or a little smaller promotions, or organizations that are involved in the sport for sure. And then streaming, as you mentioned, yeah, it has changed boxing in a particular way. Yeah, so it's not just the large scale networks that are controlling the fights. You have the likes of some of these promoters have YouTube channels, things of that nature, and they put the fighters on display there, and you see a lot of buy-in. Pro Box TV, that's one that recently has come about, and they've continued to grow, and they're doing fights on Wednesdays every 2 weeks. So we do have Wednesday night fights back in the mix, and I think that's a plus right there. We're getting to see a good deal of boxing.
I mean, look at the capability that we're gonna have with Fight TV or UFC Fight Pass. I mean,
Oh yeah,
traditionally, UFC Fight Pass is carrying boxing as well. Shout out
yeah,
to Jimmy Birchfield and CES.
oh yeah.
Um, so you've got to look at how can we get those regular cards, the little club shows on that, so that we can see development and create a following. And how can USA Boxing as an organization start streaming some of its events to create the amateur standouts that we saw in the 70s, but with a modern twist?
Oh yeah. I think there's certainly a lot of opportunities for growth in that area, especially on the amateur front with USA Boxing and just some of the local amateur shows that take place. I know here we're going to kind of revamp things in a sense and push more towards streaming a lot of the events that we do. So this is a real opportunity to see some of these young future stars as they kind of grow into their themselves in the sport in itself. And real quick, I want to shout out to my mom who dropped by. Says hello, son. Appreciate you dropping by, checking us out. Ian Cannon in the house, Two Guns Cannon, that is. So thank you for dropping in there, mother. And Melissa Tai, she said, when people refer to wheelchair or disabled individuals in sports, can you illustrate language that you find insensitive or grinds your gears?
I think that use of cripple or c word is offensive, and I think that needs to be taken out of context.
Yeah,
I think everyone has their own version of what is offensive disability language.
hmm
But I think that what we need to do is we need to ask when we're in that question, because
right.
everyone has their own view of what's offensive. Disability is not offensive to me. It's offensive. It is offensive to other people. Differently abled is one that I've heard. Special needs is one that I use, or one that I teach kids to use
Mhm.
when they're approaching disability. So, those that's sort of the language that I find appropriate.
Oh yeah. Certainly. And that's a great question there, Melissa. And I think yeah, that's good to hear it from your perspective there, Ian. And I know myself individually, just I've had the luxury of working for different organizations where I've worked alongside people who are disabled, and that has been a growth opportunity for me. And same with Melissa and many others who or go through similar paths. So I try to pick up on those things. Like if someone is deaf and they're using a translator or something of that nature, I'm looking at the person as opposed to the translator. Some people don't pick up on those things, but oftentimes they can
Valid,
read lips.
valid point, and that
Yeah,
is the big one. So I commend you for that. Uh,
yeah. And I had to learn that just from interactions and just and being on the job and all of that stuff. So I think that is a plus. And I had a neighbor in my last neighborhood. He was deaf. He could read lips well, and he would speak and everything. So it's just like one of those natural things. It doesn't have to be abnormal or anything of that nature. It's just
it
like
doesn't
a
have
natural
to be
conversation.
stigmatized at all, no. And I think that for me, one of the things that I always say to people, whether it's in my professional life, in my dating life before I was engaged,
Yeah,
in my social life period, I'm here to educate you, so ask me questions, because it's
yeah,
my job to teach and educate and abolish that stigma. And that's one of the things that boxing helped me do, is abolish the disabled stigma every single day. So for
yeah,
that, I'm very grateful.
yeah. That is pretty awesome right there. And there, and as Melissa said, yeah, let's be honest, there are hidden disabilities as well. So certainly, got to be vigilant of all that stuff. Uh,
Absolutely. Did you have any further questions for me about my career, or anything like that? You can ask me a training, whatever you want.
oh yeah. So yeah, what did I ask you? Yeah, as a matter of fact, the training process uh, so you're working with some individuals now, and I know I've seen you in videos. You work with some individuals who aren't in wheelchairs, and I think that's pretty awesome as well. Because like you mentioned, so the techniques, things of that nature, they all translate in the same way.
Absolutely. So I mean, I live in Norwich now, and before COVID, I was working with a whole bunch of young fighters at Strike Zone MMA, and it was
Yeah.
thank you, thank you for the.
Congrats for sure.
It's gonna be a while. It's gonna be um, summer of 25. So, but
Oh,
we're enjoying our life, and we're enjoying just being engaged and being two young people in love. So it's fun for us.
awesome.
Uh, But I worked with young fighters now, and occasionally I'll go to Koba, and if there's a young fighter that I think could use my help, I'll give my advice and do what I can do. Or if I'm at a show and I see something when a kid is warming up, I may tap him on the shoulder and say, "Hey, listen, you know, I'm seeing this, and I'm seeing that you're doing this well, or I'm seeing that this is something you could improve on." And that's what people did with me, and they didn't have to. They could have looked at me as a sideshow freak, so they didn't. So I always try to, as you say, pass that knowledge on.
Oh yeah, that is awesome right there. Now, as far as you competing, any thoughts run to your mind of joining back in the ranks? Because as we know, many boxers they retire and then ultimately come back. You know.
So as of right now, I'm retired. As of right now, I'm retired. If there were an offer to come across my desk, it would have to be very enticing. And not only from a monetary standpoint, but from a eye standpoint, so that we could grow the sport. And that's really what would be the most important to me, you know. And as my old promoter Lou DeBella and Rich Capiello, as they both taught me over the years, it's not about what you get for your wallet. It's about what you can do to inspire other people. So if growing my story helps do that, because I don't look at myself as an inspiration, I'm just a regular guy who happens to enjoy punching from a seated position. If I can help that grow, then yes, I would entertain it. But as of right now, I'm retired.
Good to go. Good to go. Yeah, and I want to see the sport grow as well, and I think that is pretty awesome. Now, thinking about that, because I know you started before, I guess, social media kind of got to the stage that it is now. Do you feel that has kind of helped with kind of growing it, the social media aspect that we see infused in almost everything now?
I think that, yeah, I think there are some notable wheelchair boxers out there. There's a great group in England. There is a phenomenal wheelchair boxer out of Canada, Leo Ceremi, who's a great
Oh,
guy who boxed pre-injury and now is boxing post-injury and doing some great stuff. Shout out to Leo. And I think that if we all band together and get our stories out there individually, uh, partnering with a group like USA in the future, or a big alphabet like the WBC or IBF, is not out of the question.
yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that can play a role certainly, and that's another addition, and it pushes towards the growth of the sport, which we're all looking for there. So I'm
Because in
definitely in
keeping
support
with
of it.
the sport, one of the things that we wanted to make sure we did was that I fought on able-bodied cards. That there was
Oh
a
yeah,
disabled match on able-bodied cards. Because the issue is, think about wheelchair basketball, right? Wheelchair
yeah,
basketball is great. I commend the sport, but it doesn't have the same viewership as the NBA.
right,
So if you wanna make that work and get the stories out there, then there has to be some element of inclusion. That
yeah,
doesn't mean that I want to spar against an able-bodied guy who's standing and circle around me. No, that just means that
yeah,
I want two disabled athletes and an able-bodied event competing at that event with their peers, which was part of why I wanted to compete. I wanted to do what my friends like Mike Oliver were doing, and Mike was a sparring partner for me for years because we were close in size, and
yeah.
so that just worked incredibly well. And gotta love Mike, man. He's one of the best to ever do it.
Good stuff, Mike. Mike, yeah, I think that is yeah, definitely an awesome way right there to be inclusive. Yeah, on the able-bodied shows. I don't see why not. I think that would be great for that inclusion and us seeing that more, because that's an opportunity, as mentioned, to reach more of an audience. And I think your story will resonate along with others who have overcome these disabilities or whatnot and been able to carve a path out on their own there. So I think that would be resonating, and I'd like to see more of it as well. and there's a place for it as well. There's a place for mixing these things in and us making it happen. It's just a matter of the right people talking to to those who have certain say in the sport, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. So I got a question for you. As an official, what did you notice in watching me compete? I'd love to see from what you see in versus able-bodied boxing. I just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
You know, until running into you, I wasn't aware of it. And I think that might be the case with a lot of individuals who may be fans of the sport in general. They just weren't aware. And the thing that I noticed is if you remove the footwork aspect from it in terms of people being on their feet, everything that you were doing from the waist up was essentially what you would see just in a regular boxing match. So I noticed that there is some fluidity to it, and it is entertaining, and there's a place for it because some who haven't seen it, they may wonder, okay, how does that work or whatnot. But when you see you in there, you're doing the same thing. Like you have your guard up, you're actually moving, you're blocking punches, parrying punches. You're able to throw. You mentioned that 1-2-1 being one of the key things. So you can pretty much do pretty much all of the punches, just about everything that you can do on your feet there from the wheelchair. So I noticed that there is a means for having competitive events or competitive matchups between those in wheelchair boxing. And it was eye opening for me. And I think that if more people catch on to it, they'll get that same understanding and they'll see what I saw in that, okay, yeah, this works, this works. And I think it's something that could continue to expand as long as we get it in front of more audiences.
Well, thank you for that. Any other questions?
Oh yeah, well yeah, that's so yeah, I know I've had you for about an hour. Yeah, we're bordering on an hour. So I know you mentioned Facebook, so that's how people can reach you. Facebook, and did you mention another avenue? I want to make sure that I can have it to where everyone can reach out to you if they want to touch base.
Facebook and Instagram, and that is Two Guns
Two
Boxing
guns.
with no G, and that's spelled out. And let me just give you what I'm going to do is I'm going to screenshot my Instagram and make sure that is right for you right now.
All right. Cool, cool. And shout out to Joe Casano. Said I've known Ian for many years. He's a well-respected friend and inspiration to all that know him. Good stuff there,
Thank
Joe.
you, Joe. Thank you, my
Indeed.
friend.
Indeed. Salute to your Flack Boxers who dropped in as well. Appreciate you being here, buddy.
Black Boxing, thank you so much. So that is two spelled out and guns, and then boxing with no G.
Okay, BXING. Okay.
BXIN.
Oh yeah.
BXIN.
Oh yeah, boxing. Okay, gotcha. On Instagram. Okay, good to go. And you're on Facebook, and I'll make sure to share it, add that to the actual video description as well. And yeah, Melissa Todd says I'm really interested in speaking with boxers who box professionally before an injury and the role wheelchair boxing plays in their lives. Thanks, Ian. Yes, that's a very interesting one there. I know Paul Williams, he ended up having a motorcycle accident and it left him paralyzed from I think the waist down or something like that.
It did. And, we reached out to Paul when I was turning pro because Lou DeBella, who we all know is a phenomenal promoter and worked with me extensively, Lou explored me either training with Paul or fighting Paul. But Paul had quite a bit of reach on me as a middleweight. So
yeah.
we scrapped that because I was a flyweight and that didn't really work well. But I reached out to Paul and he was a mentor throughout my career through social media and phone calls and
awesome.
So he was a great dude, just
yeah.
And
yeah, I understand. Yeah, he was a very long fighter there, so I know what you're saying with that reach. He was always long.
Because we don't move the chairs in the American style of wheelchair boxing. In the British style, they move the chair. I personally advocate that because I find that leaves you vulnerable to getting caught with a shot.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're using my style, you're much safer. You're a little bit more engaged in fight safety and in the defensive envelope. So less likely to get caught. But there are
Yep.
some great boxers out of England. I really commend what they do, and I would love to see in years down the line, America versus UK tournament,
Mm.
to see which style comes out to be the most effective.
You know, that would be pretty awesome right there. That you're planting the seed there for something, Ian. You're planting the seed. Let's see if we can make this happen. That's a seed being planted for sure.
I had to have my promoter hat on for just a quick second there. You know, but the style that equated best to wheelchair boxing was a mix of Barry McGuigan from the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
Mickey Ward from the late 90s, of course, but I'm partial since Mickey trained me, and then a little bit of Ray Boom Boom Mancini and Livingston Bramble. You mix all of those
Okay.
together and you get the perfect wheelchair boxer. Because
Well, that's awesome right there. Tough fighters right there. That's one thing that you can definitely denote with all of them. Tough mentally and physically.
you have Bramble's defensiveness, McGuigan's output, Mancini's ability for gameness and sort of squared up style, and then you have Mickey's conditioning.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Irish Mickey Ward. That's good stuff right there. And yeah, real quick, before I let you go there, Ian, Two Guns, how did you earn that nickname?
The great John Scully.
All right.
So I used to roll around the gym talking smack and telling stories as a teenager. That was my thing. So he called me Rolly. And then when I started getting in shape and developing some definition, because I used to love to do pull-ups for conditioning.
Oh, cool.
And he, because think about it from a wheelchair perspective, if you can move your own body weight for when you're out of your chair, if you fall, then you're much more likely to be in a safe position.
Oh yeah.
So that was one of the training tools that we sort of operated with, is use your body weight as a tool. And so when I started getting in shape, Scully started calling me Two Guns, and the name stuck.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's good to go. Two Guns right there, folks. You heard it. So don't get it confused. He's ready to go at any point. No, that is awesome. Melissa, yeah, you want to see USA versus Ireland? Hey, that'll be another good one right there.
As an Irishman, as somebody of Irish descent, I gotta say I'd love to see that one too. And you know, John Duddy and I have discussed that at some length. So that may or may not happen in the future. We'll see.
All right.
We'll leave you guys wanting with that one.
Well, we're rooting for it for sure there, Ian. We're definitely rooting for it. We would love to see it. So, man, yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Definitely just speaking with you, Ian. And as I mentioned, the honor has certainly been with me. I appreciate you taking the time to come on, and all those who have joined in attendance and those watching on a replay. It is definitely a pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for having me, and I wish everybody a safe and happy holiday season.
Indeed. Happy holidays, folks. Thank you for joining us. And of course, stay tuned. We're going to release shorts of this as well, just to keep the momentum going. So yeah, thank you all. Definitely have a good night.